Hello students, welcome to EPG Patasala. I am Dr. K.R. Rammohan, Associate Professor, Head Department of Anthropology, Sikkim University. Today we are going to talk about a module on historical particularism, is also called Franz Boas School, from the paper Theories and Methods in Social Cultural Anthropology. Before we go this module, let us see what are the objectives and learning outcomes. To know about what is the concept of historical particularism, to understand the concept of historicism, to know more about the fieldwork and the major contributions of Franz Boas, to know how other anthropologists have significantly followed the historical particularism school. Historicism or historical particularism is an approach to the study of anthropology and more specifically to culture as early in the mid 19th and 20th century. This has a unique combination of two distinct forms of historicism. One is diffusion and the other one is historical particularism. Now, why did this school arise? This is due to because social cultural evolution offered an explanation that culture change, what happened and where, was unable to give by the classical evolutionists. What were the influences and what were the cultural process for change and why cultures develop? This was not fully explained by the predecessor cultural evolutionists or the classical evolutionists. Why certain cultures are in different places, why certain cultures are fully developed. But they gave a unilinear explanation that all cultures might have passed through similar stages. So to accomplish this end, an historical approach was needed for the study of culture change. And the development, not only what happened and where happened, but importantly, why and how cultures change. So with this, Franz Boas is considered to be father of American anthropology, stressed the need, the apparently enormous complexity of cultural variation, why some cultures are different, why this culture is different. And perhaps because of this complexity, that all cultures have this complex systems, Boas believed that it was premature to formulate universal laws like scientific laws that all societies have passed through similar stages or all cultures had the same pattern of development. And Boas also felt that a single cultural trait had to be studied in the context of the society in which it appeared, in which they have appeared. So Boas was very critical of this evolutionary scheme of societies, and he was very critical of this comparative method. Later he published an article called The Limitation of the Comparative Method of Anthropology, in which in publication he said that he has a lot of objections to this evolutionist approach. In this, Boas has opined that anthropologists should spend less time in developing theories which are completely based on insufficient data. So Boas was of opinion that Anthropologists should devote their energies, their time, and their perspectives in collecting as much as data they could and as quickly as possible before the culture disappears. One, we can regret that we could have recorded that data, but we have lost that culture. So Bose asserted that the valid interpretations could be made, and subsequently the theories which we come out and which anthropologists propose at a large scale, only when there is a sufficient body of knowledge is gathered. That means one should collect large amount of ethnographic data, and one can come the laws governing the cultural variation which we come out or which we can take out from this gathered information and the data. With that we can come to some conclusions, but without sufficient data it is unscientific, it is illogical to come out with narratives. So according to this method, Franz Boas advocated that the whole core or the essence of science is to deny or mistrust all the conjecture expectations, but one should only look for observable facts. That fact should be put forth to verify whether this is correct or not. Only then it becomes scientific in one sense. But the facts that are recorded, even by the most diligent observer, the ethnographer, will necessarily reflect what he or she thinks considers important. So, one should not imagine that some facts are important and some facts are not important. One has to, the ethnographer should collect all the facts, whether you think important or not important. Only then you will get the full ethnographic data. Although it was appropriate for Franz Boas to criticize the erstwhile armchair theorizing or armchair anthropologist were, what means that without going to the field, without going to the doing any kind of field work, they just propose grand theories without taking the innumerable local details, will give only false explanations. And with that one cannot explain the major variations that anthropologists could have observed. But we may ask, did Franz Boas give any definition on culture? But Boas concentrated on refuting the evolutionary perspective. In doing so, he developed the characteristics of culture. Today, most of the anthropologists still agree to, perhaps they could not agree for the definition of culture, but they agree that the characteristics of culture proposed by Boas are mostly relevant. So in that sense, Franz Boas established the concept of culture or the attributes of culture is that culture is learned by all the members of the society right from the birth. It is not only just mere learning for the sake of learning. It is shared by all the members. It is shared and it is integrated. Moreover, Bose shifted anthropological thought from the origin of culture to the investigation of individual cultures, which are very unique to Bose method. Hence, Franz Bose expressed that cultures were composed of numerous traits, and these numerous traits have history, and perhaps this trait must have situated as a result of a greater diffusion. So let us see what are the factors leading to Franz Bose culture concept. Being said that culture has traits and each trait should be understood from a historical point of view, perhaps it could have come from a diffusion. Bose desired to work out for the detailed history of delimited regions of what Kroeber was called as culture areas. So the principal methodological technique he used for the study of the dissemination or diffusion of traits. How did one cultural trait has come into this culture? How did it come into the process of diffusion? It might have originated somewhere, it might have invented somewhere, or it might have come through several stages to incorporate into this culture. For example, investigating the myths, Bose concluded that at least with respect to mythology, the Navajo community, the Navajo ethnic community in the central US were most strongly influenced from northwest of North America to the northeast of the Mississippi. That means he could find out there was some direction how the myths were come to this Navajo tribe in his times, taking that ethnographic study. So in brief, according to Bose, myths are the products of such complex histories that the search for origins is futile. So he denied the speculation method by Edward Bernard Tyler, who said that nature myths originated because of savages' desire to understand universe. So savage people in the earliest form of civilization had these myths about nature, where Bose did not agree fully about that. So in that sense, one can say that culture is basically an emergent system which has come through an historical process. So Franz Bose insisted that culture is basically historically determined. So historical particularism or Franz Bose school, the bottom aspect or the fundamental principle is that cultures are historically determined. It amounts to saying that cultures are emergent. That means it took long time to emerge. So closely associated with the development of Franz Bose's view that culture is an emergent system because of his notion of cultural determinism. If culture does not arise from within the human being, then it must have come from somewhere without a human being's intervention. How did it come from all of a sudden? Has it come from vacuum? No. So if that is the case, then it must have an historical base. So Franz Boas held that human beings learn rather than create culture. So it must have a diffusion pattern. So he is stressing the principle of migration and diffusion, which could be, perhaps there could be conglomeration of many cultural traits. So human behavior and beliefs reflect not his native intelligence, but the cultural tradition in which they are raised. And these cultural traits must have followed some historical principles. And in particular, cultural traits are to be explained in the closest terms of the principle of diffusion and modification. Okay, let's say one cultural trait has entered.